You ever notice how the loudest person in the room is often the one who knows the least? Well, there's actually a psychological reason for that. It's a cognitive bias that explains so much, from our terrible bosses to those wild arguments you see online. It's called the Dunning-Kruger Effect, and to really understand it, we've got to start with one of the weirdest crime stories you've ever heard.
Yeah, you heard that right. To get a handle on this whole thing, we have to start with that truly bizarre question. And I know, it sounds like the setup to a really bad joke, but it's a real story, and it led to one of the most important psychological discoveries of our time.
So, let's set the scene. The story kicks off in Pittsburgh, way back in 1995, with a man who was absolutely convinced he had figured out the perfect crime. Okay, so, get this. The guy's name was MacArthur Wheeler, and his big idea was based on something he'd learned about lemon juice being used as invisible ink. So his logic was, if he just rubbed lemon juice all over his face, he'd be totally invisible to security cameras. He was so confident, he went and robbed 2 banks, and he was arrested later that same day. The best part? When the police showed him the security footage, he was genuinely baffled. He just could not believe his trick didn't work. And this profound, just bottomless lack of self-awareness got 2 psychologists wondering, what is going on here? Why are some people so completely blind to their own incompetence?
You see, Wheeler's incredible confidence wasn't just some random one-off fluke. It turned out to be a massive clue to a universal glitch in how our brains work, a tendency that the psychologist Dunning-Kruger would soon give a famous name.
And here we have it, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. In their big 1999 paper, they officially defined it as a cognitive bias where people with low ability at something don't just do a bad job, they also wildly overestimate how well they did. And when you see the data from their original experiment, it's pretty mind-blowing.
So take a look at this. This is from their first study on grammar and logic skills. The students who performed the absolute worst, down in the bottom 12th percentile, they didn't think they were bad at all. In fact, they believed they were above average, guessing their score was up around the 62nd percentile. Just look at that gap. That is a staggering mismatch between how they saw themselves and what reality was.
So the big question is, why? Why does this happen? Dunning-Kruger called it the dual burden, and it's a brilliant way to put it. The first problem is you just don't have the skills. But the second problem, and this is the real kicker, is that the very skills you need to be good at something are the exact same skills you need to recognize how bad you are. It all comes down to something called metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. If you don't know what good grammar looks like, how on earth could you spot the bad grammar in your own writing? You can't?
Now, it's really easy to look at a guy who puts lemon juice on his face and just write him off as an outlier. But the truth is, this isn't some rare condition that only affects a few people. It's more like a bug in our mental operating system that affects pretty much everyone.
Just think about driving. Study after study ask people, are you an above-average driver? And consistently, around 90% of people say yes, which is, mathematically impossible. You can't have 90% of people be above average. This is the perfect, everyday example of the Dunning-Kruger effect playing out on a massive scale.
And once you know what to look for, you start to see this everywhere. Seriously. It's the person on social media who argues with an actual scientist after watching a 10-minute YouTube video. It's the boss who's totally convinced their terrible idea is a stroke of genius. It's the amateur investor who gets lucky on one meme stock and suddenly thinks they're a Wall Street wizard. It's even that student who walks out of an exam absolutely sure they aced it and then ends up with a failing grade.
Come on, we've all seen this comment, right? This phrase has pretty much become the unofficial motto of the Dunning-Kruger effect online. It just perfectly captures that dangerous cocktail of a little bit of knowledge and a whole lot of confidence that fuels so many pointless internet fights. Okay, so if we're all susceptible to this, is there a way out? Is there a way we can spot our own blind spots before we, figuratively end up with lemon juice on our face? The good news is, yes. Yes, there is. And interestingly, the key to the solution comes from looking at the flip side of the coin. See, those same studies showed that the top performers, the real experts, they often have the opposite problem. They tend to slightly underestimate their own abilities. And that's because things feel easy to them, so they just assume those things must be easy for everyone else too. It's a fascinating, different kind of blind spot.
So how do we fight this thing? Well, the most powerful cure is competence. Just keep learning. The more you learn about a subject, the more you begin to appreciate the vastness of what you don't know.
Second, actively seek out honest feedback, especially from people who aren't afraid to tell you you're wrong. Third, you've got to challenge your own beliefs. Actively go looking for evidence that contradicts what you think you know. And finally, you have to practice that metacognition. Get in the habit of just stepping back and asking, okay, what might I be missing here?
In the end, it really all boils down to this fantastic quote from David Dunning himself. The very nature of this bias is that it's invisible from the inside. And while it's super easy to see this flaw in other people, real wisdom is having the humility to search for it in ourselves.
So, I'll leave you with this question to chew on. We all have our blind spots. We all have that one area where we're standing on our own peak of confidence. So, what's one area in your life, could be your job, a hobby, even your opinions, where you might be a little more confident than you are competent? Because the truly wise people aren't the ones with all the answers. They're the ones who are